In a magical world called Halkagana at the Tristan Academy for Magicians, Louise de la Valliere heads the class on her first day as a second-year student. Her teacher asks her to perform a simple spell, to change pebbles into brass, though her peers mock her with the nickname Zero. As soon as she casts the spell, the room explodes. Despite being from a famous magician family, Louise has a 0% success rate for casting spells. On the day of the familiar summoning ceremony, Krish summons a fire salamander, Guiche summons Verdandi, a large mole, but Louise summons a human being, who cannot understand what Louise is saying. Louise is disappointed but cannot break the ritual's tradition, so she makes a contract with Saito by kissing him, and runes appear on his left hand. Louise tries to shut him up by performing a silent spell which backfires and allows Saito to speak and understand Louise's language. Saito thinks he's been kidnapped until he sees the two moons in the sky, and realizes that he's in another world. Saito must deal with being Louise's familiar, and he is often whipped for being disobedient. In the morning, Saito dresses Louise before they go to breakfast, where Saito only gets a piece of bread and meets a kind maid, Saista. Unhappy with the arrogance of nobles, Saito mocks Guichi's two-timing nature, so Guichi challenges him to a duel. Despite being severely beaten up by Guichi's summoned brass golem, Saito refuses to back down. Impressed, Guichi tosses him a sword to give him a chance. The runes etched in Saito's hand begin to glow the moment he touches the sword, enhancing his strength and speed and giving him sword skills, and he instantly defeats Guichi. However, he soon collapses after the fight from fatigue. Mr. Colbert and the headmaster Osmond suspect Saito may be a legendary familiar. With his victory over Guichi, Saito has become popular among commanders and several nobles. Saista and the commoners, who now call him Our Sword, secretly feed Saito as Louise is withholding food as his new punishment. He also learns why people call her Zero. To add to his troubles, Krish, a noble from Germania, has chosen him as her next boyfriend. In a devious plan, she attempts to seduce him, although this fails when Louise finds out. After considering Saito's hidden talent with a sword, Louise drags him to town to buy him a sword. Kirsch matches Louise's gift with a more impressive sword, which causes more conflict between Saito and Louise. Louise's sword later reveals itself to be the talking sword Derflinger. Osmond continues his harassment of his secretary Lugaville. Siesta is forced into the service of Count Mott to be his mistress. Disgusted by the lack of regard that nobles have for commoners, Saito tries his best to rescue her. They make a deal where Count Mott asks for a particular family heirloom book from a Germania family. Coincidentally, it's Kirsch's family, which was summoned from another world. Saito asks Kirsch for the book, but Kirsch wants him to date her. After refusing her demand, Saito attempts to take on Count Mott with Kirsch's expensive sword. But his runes do not activate as it is an ornamental sword not meant for combat, and he struggles to lift it. Louise and the others arrive just in time to prevent Saito from being executed. Kirsch agrees to give Count Mott the book in exchange for Siesta's freedom and forgiving Saito for his offense. Saito catches a glimpse of the heirloom book and is surprised to find that it's just an old porn magazine from Japan. After they return to the academy, Siesta kisses Saito on the cheek in thanks for his efforts. The exhibition of new familiars is a day away, and Louise is feeling rather depressed about it. Not only does Saito have nothing impressive to show, but this year the Princess of Tristan will be present, which makes the event more important. As night approaches, desperation sets in as Saito is unable to produce any act worthy of praise. A visitor of Louise's room turns out to be Princess Henrietta herself, and she explains how she and Louise are childhood friends. The next day, Saito performs a weak sword-swinging demonstration, only to be dragged off stage by Louise. They witness Fouquet the sculptor attempting to break into the school's treasure vault using an earth gem. Louise tries to stop her with her magic, but her blast misses the golem and hits the tower wall, breaking the magic barrier to the vault. Tabitha and her dragon familiar, Sylphid, fly in to help, but are too late to prevent Fouquet from stealing the fabled Staff of Destruction and making her escape. Worried that the princess may be blamed for Fouquet's theft, Louise volunteers to go catch her. Kirsch and Tabitha volunteer as well. They travel to the place of Fouquet's last sighting. Escorted by Longueville, Kirsch, Tabitha, and Saito enter an empty house where Tabitha discovers the hidden Staff of Destruction. Fouquet's golem appears outside. Louise tries to fight the golem with some spells, but fails. As she's about to be crushed, Saito rushes in to save her. Her confidence broken, Louise breaks into tears. Saito is moved by this and attacks the golem himself, as Sylphid rescues the nobles. He uses Kirsch's sword, but it breaks on contact with the golem. Durlfinger calls on to Saito to use him. Saito draws Durlfinger and the runes on his hand glow again. He's able to slash the golem's legs, but they reform themselves. Louise tries to help using the Staff of Destruction, which Saito realizes as an M72 rocket launcher, and with his rune-enabled abilities, he fires at the golem and destroys it. In the aftermath, Longueville claims the staff and reveals herself to have been Fouquet all along. She engineered the scenario to discover how to use the staff. She tries to kill the students with the staff, but nothing happens as rocket launchers are single-use weapons. Saito knocks Fouquet out. Later, Osmond reveals that 30 years previously he was fighting a monster, when a man from another world, an American soldier from the Vietnam War, used one of his two staffs to save his life. After the man died, Osmond buried the man and kept the remaining staff. The school holds a ball to celebrate. Louise asks Saito to dance and thanks him for saving her. Henrietta congratulates Louise for capturing Fouquet. She offers her hand to Saito, but Saito misunderstood and kisses her on the lips. Henrietta asks Louise and Saito to work undercover to determine if nobles are taking advantage of the commoners. Louise naively loses all of their money in a casino where she was hoping to increase their funds. Refusing to ask Henrietta for more money, Saito and Louise find work at a tavern called Charming Fairy Inn, run by Saren and his daughter, Jessica. Louise works as a waitress and Saito works as a dishwasher where he's in close contact with Jessica, much to Louise's displeasure. Scarron holds a contest for the waitresses. Whoever gets the most tips gets a large reward, plus the chance to wear a special maid outfit. Louise is unable to earn any tips because of her temper until an arrogant noble enters the bar. After bringing him to justice, the noble runs off, but leaves a large bribe for Louise. The tip enables Louise to win the contest. Even though she and Saito now have to leave, Louise wears the special maid outfit just for him. It is now summer vacation, and many students are traveling back to their families. Kirsch goes along with Tabitha to her home. As a result, Louise and Saito are alone for once. Kirsch learns that Tabitha's real name is Charlotte, Princess of Gallia, and that she has a tragic past in which her mother drank a potion that drove her insane. Her reason for returning home is revealed to be a mission from her uncle, the King of Gallia. Meanwhile, Montmorency is upset that Guiche has been flirting with other girls, makes Aphrodisiac, a kind of love potion, and tries to slip it into Guiche's drink. Saito obtains a large cooking pot that was about to be thrown away and, at night, fashions it into a hot tub, similar to those in Japan. While Saito relaxes in the tub, Siesta passes by and joins him. Louise sees the two together and becomes so frustrated that she interrupts Guiche and Montmorency, and accidentally consumes the drink with the love potion in it. When Saito returns to her room, Louise gets flustered and falls completely in love with him. Louise continues her lovey-dovey behavior towards Saito, which freaks him out, as well as causes a misunderstanding with Siesta. In desperation, Saito demands that Montmorency create an antidote, but she refuses to help until he blackmails her into helping. Saito learned from Siesta that emotion-changing potions are illegal. As the antidote requires the tear of a water elemental, Montmorency and Guiche lead Saito and the love-struck Louise to Lagdorian Lake, where they make contact with a water spirit who is flooding the land so that she can search for her stolen precious treasure, but she's being hindered by magic users. Saito volunteers to deal with them, and he and Guiche fight the intruders, who turn out to be Kirsch and Tabitha. Saito promises to find whatever the water spirit has lost. The spirit trusts his word as Gandalfer and gives him the antidote. Having taken care of the love potion, Louise and Saito receive a new mission. In order to strengthen her country's alliance, Princess Henrietta is to be wed to the Emperor of Germania. Louise and Saito must recover an indiscreet letter that Henrietta wrote to Prince Wales of Albion, or the wedding will be cancelled. The princess is unable to see the prince in person because Albion is in a state of civil war. Guiche overhears the conversation and volunteers to aid the princess, and Henrietta accepts, much to Louise and Saito's ire. Before leaving, Saito learns about Gandalfer and legendary void magic from Colbert, as well as a story of two dragons. On the day of departure, their escort, Wardis, captain of the Griffin Squadron, arrives. It turns out he is also Louise's fiancé, and Saito grows jealous of him. Later, Derflinger talks to Saito about Gandalfer, and how only a Gandalfer can wield Derflinger. Wards proposes to Louise, then at dinner asks Saito to spar with him. Wards wins easily and mocks Saito's promise to protect Louise, leaving Saito depressed. That evening, Louise and Wards board the ship after he convinces her that the boys have returned home. He persists in his courtship and Louise accepts his proposal. In truth, Guiche and Saito have been delayed by the sudden appearance of Fouquet and her golem. They are saved by Kirsch and Tabitha, who showed up in Sylphid. Saito figures out that Wards and Fouquet were working together, and Louise is in trouble. Wards and Louise arrive in Albion, the floating continent, where they meet with Prince Wales. Louise delivers the letter, then Wales gives a reply letter to her that she is meant to retrieve, and learns of the power behind the uprising of nobles in Albion, the Reconquista. Their mission supposedly completed, Wards insists that they get married in Albion. He reveals himself as a member of the Reconquista and is a threat to Wales. Louise tries to refuse, but one of Ward's allies, Cromwell, arrives with the water spirit's stolen ring and forces her to consent using mind control. The marriage proceeds with Wales officiating and is nearly complete when Saito bursts into the church and snaps Louise out of her trance. The marriage ceremony is ruined, Wards kills Wales, steals the letter from Louise, and tries to kill Saito. However, Ward's treatment of Louise angers Saito, and he's able to unlock his abilities as Gandalfer and fully utilize Durflinger. The two of them are rescued by Tabitha and the others, and Sylphid flies everyone home. Saito, holding Louise in his arms, kisses her. Louise informs Henrietta of Wales's death, and the princess's wedding is cancelled. Louise also warns Osmond about the Reconquista. Osmond then tells her about void magic and Gandalfer. After another argument with Louise, Saito accompanies Siesta to her home village of Talbes to find a dragon. Louise and others follow them and they locate the rare dragon, which Siesta's family has kept as an heirloom. Saito finds a tombstone with a Japanese epitaph on it. The dragon turns out to be an A6M0 fighter, a Japanese aircraft. It's revealed that Siesta's great-grandfather was an IJN pilot from World War II, and that he was magically transported to Halkagina just as Saito was. Colbert explains that two dragons had flown during a solar eclipse, but one disappeared. He suggests that the timing of the second pilot, Siesta's great-grandfather, was off, and that the solar eclipse ended before the second pilot was able to fly through the portal. Saito concludes that the other pilot returned home, and this is his chance to return home as well. As they bring the plane back to school, Albion declares war on Tristane, wanting to use the country as a base from which they can conquer the rest of the continent and plan to launch their attack in 3 days during their next solar eclipse. Saito tells Louise that he wants to return home during the upcoming solar eclipse, and he gets angry when she acts as if she doesn't care. A war between Albion and Tristane is deemed inevitable. Henrietta assembles a military force that conscripts the boys from the academy. Louise walks in on a sleeping Saito, whereupon she says goodbye. The next morning, Saito wakes to find a letter in which Louise has written, "You're fired, just go wherever you want." Louise decides to join the princess in the war. Saito gets in his Zero fighter, while Henrietta advances with the Tristane military to intercept the invading Albion force at the village of Talbes. Instead of flying straight into the eclipse, Saito attacks Albion's dragon squadrons, who are unable to keep up with the plane's speed. Saito runs out of bullets and is attacked by wards and a wind dragon. Louise jumps from Sylphid to Saito's plane. Tabitha, Kirsch, and Guiche together break down Fouquet's golem, and Fouquet flees for good. At the thought of Saito being harmed, Louise finally makes a connection with Saito and unlocks her void magic for the first time, casting a powerful spell known as Explosion, which destroys the entirety of Albion's aerial force, including wards. After the battle with the solar eclipse past and the Zero fighter nearly destroyed, Saito and Louise sit by the plane's wreckage where they have an argument once again and end up kissing. Elsewhere, Cromwell tries to hypnotize Kirsch and Tabitha with the Ring of Andavari, but Guiche knocks him unconscious. Later, the 4 aristocrats are awarded medals by Henrietta, and Tabitha is given the Water Spirit's ring to fulfill the promise to return it. Louise is so excited about her medal that she rushes to show it to Saito, only to find him chatting with Siesta. In a typical fashion, Louise overreacts and punishes Saito. Saito is overjoyed to find himself back in Japan, having returned in the Zero fighter. When he finds that Louise is not with him, Saito realizes that returning without her has no meaning anymore. The fighter crashes and Saito awakens to find that it was all a dream and he's still in Halkagenia. He hugs Louise, grateful for her presence, which embarrasses her. She explains that she's grateful that he stayed behind for her sake, including letting him sleep in her bed. The next day, she gives Saito a pair of magical glasses whose gems blink whenever he so much looks at another girl. She, of course, reacts in a typical fashion and punishes him for his indiscretions. Later that day, while watching newly crowned Queen Henrietta parade through the streets of town, Saito's glasses start blinking, and Louise overreacts again, leading to Saito's imprisonment as a suspected assassin. Louise attempts to clear the misunderstanding but is turned away by Agnes, who leads the Palace Musketeer Force. Henrietta meets with Saito in his cell and states that Tristan needs his legendary familiar power, Cromwell has been killed in his cell, and someone within Tristan is likely responsible. The perpetrator earlier revealed to have obtained the Ring of Andvari, which Tabitha was to return to the water spirit. Henrietta then allows Louise to rush into his arms, relieved that Saito is unhurt. On returning home under escort, Agnes tells them that any future messages from the Queen will be passed on using the codename Zero. She then tells Saito that she will overlook his indiscretion. Back in their room, Louise insists Saito explain the misunderstanding that Agnes mentioned and returns to her previous treatment on him. The next morning, Agnes rushes to find Louise holding a rider's crop and sitting astride a beaten half-naked Saito. Embarrassed, she retreats momentarily, then returns to inform them that Henrietta had been kidnapped. The supposedly dead Wales appears to take Henrietta to Albion. He uses his vow from their earlier days to convince her into following him. The musketeer force chases Wales, but he repulses them with his magic. Saito and Louise go to rescue Henrietta by using the Zero Fighter with Creech and Tabitha following them. Everyone then confronts Wales at Lagdorian Lake as he combines Henrietta's magic with his. Henrietta refuses to leave Wales's side. Wales, later revealed to be revived and controlled by Cromwell's Ring of Andvari, is defeated by Louise with a Dispel spell. Wales is released from the control of the ring and asks Henrietta to make a new vow that she will move on and fall in love with someone else, before dying again. When all the boys from the school leave for the upcoming war in Albion, Julio Cesare, a knight and priest, transfers to the school from Romalia, instantly becomes popular with the girls, and shows an interest in Louise. Agnes and her musketeer force burst into the school and force the girls out of Mr. Colbert's class to train in case of rebellion. Julio challenges Saito to a fight in which the winner gets to kiss Louise. Saito receives special training from Agnes, but Louise shows up and attacks Saito in a jealous rage yet again. He fights against Julio the next day with wooden swords, but Julio loses to him on purpose, which angers Saito. Later, Henrietta tells him of the approaching war with Albion and their leader, Governor Sheffield. Louise's eldest sister, Eleanor, drags her, Saito, and Sesta back to the Valier mansion, where Louise is announced to be engaged to a duke. Louise tries to prove to her family that she isn't the Zero anymore, but cannot reveal that she is a user of Void. Meanwhile, Louise looks for Saito, goes to his room, and kisses Siesta, whom she has mistaken for Saito. Saito goes to talk to her at night, but instead finds Eleanor, who beats him. The next day, when Louise's father forbids her from going into a war, she gets upset and flees to a children's boat. Louise's gentle and kind sister, Catalia, convinces Saito to stay by Louise's side. Saito finds her and confesses his true feelings to Louise, then makes out with her, finds his way out of the Valier residence, and heads back to school with Louise. She doesn't believe him about what happened and beats him again, while Siesta tells herself that she's the only one for Saito. Louise's sisters move in and make Saito do all the work. At night, Siesta makes a pass at Saito when Louise shows up. Just when Louise is about to strike him with her newer whip, an explosion occurs. A thief has stolen something belonging to Henrietta and Wales from the principal's office, and Osman pinpoints the woman with a magic seal on her chest. Saito and Julio try to do it secretly, but Louise finds Saito and tries to hurt him again. Then, a commotion in Catlia's room gets their attention. The thief is found out to be Michael, Agnes's lieutenant. And when everything is done and over with, just because Saito didn't tell Louise what he was ordered to do, along with other things that were justifiable, she beats him with her new whip out of spite. Agnes gives Henrietta evidence on a conspirator in Tristan, and devises a secret plan to verify it. Saito and Louise were ordered to be at Scarron's Inn to receive further instructions. They take their previous positions and costumes back, and are surprised by Julio's appearance. Saito runs to Henrietta, who asks him to be her bodyguard as she poses as a commoner when faked being kidnapped in order to lure out Albion's spy. Louise is left behind since she would just get in the way. In the rain, Saito and Henrietta evade detection from the soldiers who are searching for the Queen by behaving like sweethearts, while Louise unexpectedly learns of the details of the Queen's mission when she accidentally runs into Agnes, who had been following the spy's courier. In the theater town, while Scarron and the girls are in the middle of performing a play, Henrietta, Julio, and the musketeer force confront Lishman, the traitorous finance minister, and his army. Lishman escapes into an underground passageway, but Agnes follows and kills him. The aftermath proves predictable when Louise smells Henrietta's perfume on Saito, while Saito also asks Louise what she's been doing. Henrietta is pressured to sign a declaration of war against Albion. News of a victorious battle for the Tristan and Germania allied forces reaches a town that Louise and Saito are currently in. Saito finds a sailor uniform on sale at a clothes merchant shop and buys it for Siesta instead of Louise. At the academy, Louise and Saito join Agnes and Julio as they explore a secret archive hidden beneath the school, to which Agnes was denied permission. Agnes wishes to obtain information that regards to the burning of her hometown, d'Angleterre. Eleanor is picked to open a lock to the entrance. As Mr. Colbert and the group heads further down, they are joined by Siesta, who is wearing the sailor uniform. Because Louise lacked the chest size to make the uniform look good, Louise blows a part of the cave in the way they came. With little to do but move further, the group finds the archives and is sent to look for the records. When Siesta trips and makes a mess of the books, Eleanor returns them to their proper place with magic, which triggers the archive security system and begins to bring the bookshelves to a close. Agnes finally finds the information, but a part of the page that lists the person who led the attack is missing. The group narrowly escapes the collapsing of the bridge that led them to the archives. Upon realizing that Louise had blocked their way out, Julio grants Saito permission to have intimate moments with Siesta. She is happy to oblige, and then Louise watches and prepares to blow something else up. When Saito points out that the cave which she blew up earlier is in the opposite direction, Louise tells him to shut up and blows them up. At night, Eleanor puts Louise in jail to prevent her from going into war. Even Saito and Colbert agree and don't wish to see more people get hurt. Surefield sends hired mercenaries to make a surprise attack on the Magic Academy to take all the female members of the royal families hostage. Tabitha noticed it and warns people. The musketeer force surrounds the academy, but the mercenaries counteract. Saito releases Louise, and the friends plan on how they will rescue the hostages, as it will take too long for reinforcements to come from the palace. Agnes fights Bonabito, the vice captain. It is discovered Bonabito is one of those who attacked d'Angleterre and burnt it to the ground 20 years ago. Mr. Colbert and Saito devise a plan to enter the building to save the hostages. Bonabito explains to Agnes how his captain ruthlessly burnt d'Angleterre to ashes. The team used their combined magic to enter the building. During the attack, Bonabito recognizes Colbert, who is in fact his former captain, Snake of the Flame. The two begin a heated battle. Agnes becomes furious and charges Colbert. Bonabito fires a lethal fireball towards Agnes to stop her from interrupting them, and Colbert pushes her away from the blast and is struck in the crossfire. Agnes takes revenge for her town upon Bonabito and kills him. Agnes recognizes that Colbert was also the person who saved her. Mr. Colbert, in his last moment, explains what had occurred on that fateful night. He had been given orders to destroy d'Angleterre as it had been reported to be struck with a deadly plague. After discovering there was no plague, he found a girl, Agnes, the only survivor, and carried her to safety. Kirsch, Louise, and Saito arrive. Agnes is still infuriated and she holds her sword up to strike a final blow to Colbert, but he dies before she can do so. Louise and Saito are saddened by the death of their teacher as they read a letter written by him saying how much Colbert wanted to see Saito's world, whereas Agnes is still undecided about ever forgiving him. Louise and Saito are sent to Albion and assigned a special mission by Princess Henrietta to disable the enemy's line of defense, the city of South Gotha. The plan is to have Louise's void magic prevent the engaging battle and deaths of innocent people during the crossfire. Louise accepts, but Saito is reluctant to join because of what he had been told by the late Mr. Colbert. During the assault, Louise is unable to perform her void magic. They are attacked by air fighters, and the Zero Fighter is forced to abort the mission, then land in a snowfall. With no news from Louise and Saito, the Queen agrees to send their army head-on into battle. Meanwhile, Louise debates how to explain their failure to the Queen, while Saito carries her on his back. That night, they stay in a snow cave. After Saito suggests they get naked and stay warm by contact, Louise knocks him unconscious. Saito recalls nothing of that night when he wakes up. Sheffield learns of a flying dragon made of steel, the crash-landed Zero Fighter plane, and agrees to have it recovered. Saito and Louise are attacked by an enemy air fighter, but having been injured, he quickly collapses. The young man's name is Henry Stalford. Henry, voiced by Wataru Hatano, someone who dissolved his engagement to go to war. Saito carries him and explains that his philosophy is to fight for your love, not your honor, and Louise and Saito both agree that Henry should try to return to his ex-fiancée. As the Albion troops arrive to recover the plane and kill the enemy, Henry rejoins them but doesn't tell them about Louise and Saito, who are hiding in the nearby trees. The two are rescued by Julio on his dragon. Henry hopes to see the two again someday. Henrietta is relieved that the two are okay, but Saito is irritated that Louise is still rather attached to her noble status. Henrietta's forces enter Gothia and claim it as their own. Meanwhile, Louise gets mad at Saito for not understanding her, while Saito thinks the same thing about her. A while later, Henrietta asks for Louise and Saito to scout the enemy forces. As Louise sees Saito, who is fixing the plane, she asks Julio to do the mission with her instead. As he agrees, Saito comes and is confused as to what they're doing. Filled with fury, Louise orders Julio to go soon, and he did. Albion's dragon forces attack them, but they manage to get away. As soon as they come back, Louise is advised by Derflinger to exchange roles with Saito for a day. Saito unexpectedly meets Siesta and her uncle and cousin, who are revealed to be Scarron and Jessica. As Guiche arrives and shows his Medal of Honor for coming back from the dead, no one believed him. Saito becomes frustrated with Louise about her arrogant ways of being loyal to the queen. Siesta takes Saito to a room alone and kisses him, then gives him a sleeping potion as a gift. Meanwhile, Sheffield uses the Ring of Andavari to contaminate the water system, which causes Henrietta's army to start a rebellion. They soon attack Henrietta, which causes the death of Henrietta's general, Porsche. Saito rescues Louise from the rebellion. Later, Louise is secretly approached by Henrietta's advisor, Mazarin, and asked to use her void magic to hold the enemy off while the queen and everybody prepares their evacuation. She accepts. Knowing it's a suicide mission since Albion has amassed an army of 70,000, Louise plans to send Saito away to safety, but first experiences her desire to marry. They both buy 2 magical flowers. Knowing of Louise's plan, Saito uses the sleeping potion on her after they wed. Louise passes out before she can tell him that she still and has always loved him, and Saito entrusts her to Julio, asking him to take care of her as he takes her place and opposes Albion's advancing troops. Despite his valiant efforts, Saito eventually falls on the battlefield and dies as all the Tristan ships, including the ones which Louise and Henrietta are on, safely escape. Back at the Tristan Academy, everyone mourns the loss of their hero, Saito. Louise has collapsed in grief of Saito's death. However, suddenly the magical flower that is connected to Saito comes back to life. Louise runs out and meets Saito, who is very much alive, and tells her that a fairy saved and revived him. Louise flies into a jealous rage and shoots an explosion spell at Saito once again. And that's the end of the video.
If you like the video, kindly subscribe. Till next time, my fellow plot masters.